Hi everyone, my name is Elaine, and today I'm going to be both summarizing and reviewing Terry Pratchett's The Colour of Magie, the first novel in his Discworld series. I've actually read the majority of the series before, but it was years ago and everything I read was out of order, and I really wanted to take the time to go back and read everything in order and do the series right, because I really enjoyed it the first time around. And I really wanted to share my experience with you. So I'm going to start now by summarizing The Colour of Magie, starting with the prologue, The Colour of Magie. We are introduced to the Discworld. Great Atuine, a giant turtle, bears 4 elephants, Berillia, Tabal, Great Tufan, and Jerikeen on its back. The disc is in turn carried on their backs. Waterfalls cascade over the disc's edge, and the heavens lie beyond. Astrozoologists from Krull had confirmed the existence of the turtle and its elephants by sending people over the edge recently, and now wondered the sex of the turtle. They wanted to send a larger gantry over the edge to find out. A young Cosmo-Talonian of the City Gate faction is the first outsider to see smoke rise hubward from the oldest city in the world. Chapter 1. The Colour of Magie. Ankh-Morpork is burning. 2 men, the Weasel and Bravd, watch the city burn and wonder what started the fire. Rincewind, a wizard, approaches on horseback. He explains that his companion, Twoflower, started the fire and that he must follow him and to protect him from harm because of Twoflower's box with legs. He describes how it can turn gold into copper while at the same time it is still gold. It makes men rich by destroying their possessions. It allows the weak to walk fearlessly among thieves. And it passes the strongest doors to leach the most protected treasuries, as on page 10. Rincewind warns the men not to tangle with the box. The river gates are closed. Ankh-Morpork floods, and the fire slowly goes out. As Rincewind tells Weasel and Bravd the story of how the fire started, the novel backtracks to Twoflower's arrival within the city by boat, which took place several days earlier. A greedy beggar, Blind Hugh, takes interest in Twoflower because he senses that Twoflower has a lot of money. Blind Hugh agrees to take Twoflower to an inn known as the Broken Drum in the hopes of acquiring some of Twoflower's gold, despite the fact that Twoflower's walking chest makes him uncomfortable. Broadman, the owner of the Broken Drum, begins to take advantage of Twoflower, who doesn't speak the same language. Rincewind, an alumnus of Unseen University, the high school of magic whose time and space transcendent campus is never precisely here or there, was not destined for life as a mage like many of its other alumnus. This is due to the fact that after an unfortunate event, he had left knowing only one spell and made a living of sorts around town by capitalizing on an innate gift for languages. That's on page 20. Upon hearing the exchange between foreigner and innkeeper, Rincewind comes to Twoflower's rescue and explains that the drum is a dangerous place, where Twoflower will be stabbed or poisoned by the time night falls. Twoflower doesn't believe him. The 2 men introduce themselves to each other. Rincewind reiterates what he said. Twoflower is delighted. He really wants to meet heroes and men of adventure. Rincewind discovers that Twoflower comes from the counterweight continent. Broadman takes one of Twoflower's gold coins to an alchemist to be tested. The alchemist explains that it's pure gold. Rincewind agrees to be Twoflower's guide around Ankh-Morpork. He considers fleeing the city after being paid a hefty sum of gold in advance by Ankh-Morpork standards, and wonders what would happen to Twoflower if he were left to his own devices. Rincewind is brought before the patrician on charges, which include oath-breaking and theft of a horse. He's roped into looking after Twoflower by the patrician, who knows of Twoflower because of a letter he received from the Empire. Rincewind is promised that his charges will be dropped if he looks after Twoflower and punished if anything happens to him or if he tries to shirk his duties. Especially because the Adjetian Empire of the Counterweight Continent, a continent which though small is equal in weight to all the mighty land masses in this hemicycle, will destroy them if anything happens to the tourists. That's on page 31. This exchange reveals that the sapient pearwood chest is only part of the reason Rincewind is helping Twoflower, that he forgot important details in his retelling to the heroes and may not be the most reliable narrator. Rincewind rushes back to the Broken Drum and breaks into Twoflower's room. He says they should eat elsewhere to avoid the brawl going on in the tavern downstairs. Twoflower is disappointed. He wants to see brawls in other sites like the Temple of Small Gods, meet people like Hrun the Barbarian, heroes like the Weasel and Bravd the Hublander, and do other touristy things. Rincewind and Twoflower make it downstairs after the watch has arrived and are cleaning up the bodies. Twoflower snaps a picture of Rincewind and the watch and compensates them for their time. Rincewind takes a picture of Twoflower with the man he claims is Hrun, but he knows is not really Hrun. Twoflower explains that he's an insurance salesman to Rincewind over lunch and that he may be of some help to the innkeepers of Ankh-Morpork. Twoflower and Rincewind sightsee and take lots of pictures. Disaster strikes at the Plaza of Broken Moons. Twoflower vanishes as Rincewind is taking a picture, and a thief named Stren Withel threatens him. Rincewind escapes during the confusion caused by a snap and a pair of screams. Rincewind continues to flee, but soon finds himself trapped. Unbidden, the spell welled up in his mind. It was perhaps untrue to say that he had learned it. It had learned him. The episode had led to his expulsion from Unseen University, because, for a bet, he had dared to open the pages of the last remaining copy of the creator's own grimoire, the Octavo. The spell had leapt out of the page and instantly burrowed deeply into his mind, once even the combined talents of the Faculty of Medicine had been unable to coax it. Precisely which one it was, they were also unable to ascertain, except that it was one of the 8 basic spells that were intricately interwoven with the very fabric of time and space itself. That's on pages 50 to 51. The spell dies as the luggage appears, the thief dead, hanging from its lid. Rincewind tosses the body into the River Ankh and considers fleeing the city, the luggage stops him. The patrician receives a second letter from the Empire. This one sent by the Grand Vizier, 9 turning mirrors, as opposed to the boy Emperor. It instructs the patrician to have Two-Flower killed. The patrician sends a servant to speak with the head of the Assassin's Guild. Rincewind begins to think about how to find Two-Flower. Rincewind draws a guard toward an alley with a trail of Two-Flower's gold. Rincewind knocks the guard out by hitting him with a bag of gold. When the guard comes to, Rincewind interrogates him at sword point. He had stolen the man's sword, and discovers that Two-Flower is being held at Bravdman's place. Rincewind runs to find him, trailed by the luggage. Bravdman buys some fire insurance from Two-Flower for the drum. A fight between several guilds, including those of thieves and assassins, breaks out over Two-Flower, a mutual interest. Rincewind barrels into Death on the street. Death is surprised to see him. They have an appointment later that night, roughly 500 miles away. Rincewind escapes Death. Death kills a fish salesman in frustration. Rincewind hurls a bag of gold into the drum's window as a distraction before breaking into it with the luggage in tow. Rincewind and Two-Flower escape the drum following another brawl. Rincewind smells oil. Withel trips Rincewind. Bravdman lights the oil he had been toiling with in his cellar, setting the drum on fire. Withel gets in a fight with Rincewind. Although distracted by the fire coming from the drum, Withel comes close to killing Rincewind until Two-Flower comes to his rescue, giving Rincewind time to knock the thief out. Then, Rincewind suggests they flee the scene. Rincewind and Two-Flower ride through the Widdersham Gate on a pair of horses they acquired from a merchant. The luggage catches up to them, and Rincewind finishes his story. The adventurers don't believe it. The Sending of 8. Prologue. Second prologue in the book. I don't really know how that works out, but whatever. Blind Io, Offler the crocodile god, Zephyrus, Fate, and the lady play over a board of the Discworld. Blind Io is frustrated the lady won't play fair. Chapter 2. The Sending of 8. Rincewind and Two-Flower ride toward Churm. They come across an angry mountain troll on their travels. Rincewind throws his stolen sword at the troll. The sword misses and hits a boulder, bounces off, and plunges into the back of the troll's neck, killing it just after it had wounded Two-Flower's mount. The horses bolt. Rincewind can hear dice. Two-Flower and Rincewind are separated. Two-Flower has his horse, but no luggage. He decides to follow a path to the hospitable temple of Bel-Shamharoth. Rincewind's horse is killed by a bear. Rincewind climbs a tree to escape and soon dangles from a branch surrounded by a hornet's nest, snake, death, and a pack of wolves. He is rescued by a hamadryad who pulls him into the tree. Blind Io and Offler are forced out of the game. The other gods seem to have been forgotten, for only Fate and the lady are left playing. The dryad informs Rincewind that Two-Flower has made it to the temple. Rincewind is alarmed. He knows Bel-Shamharoth, the Soul Eater, from his brief reading of the Octavo. The dryad, Druli, agrees to show him the temple so he can watch his friend's fate unfold. Rincewind realizes he was captured by Druli, not saved, and has been sentenced to death for harming the tree, wounding one of its branches as he held on for dear life. His imprisonment is supported by the other male and female dryads that appear. They conjure an image of the temple with old magic. The group watches Hrun move through the temple. Rincewind takes advantage of the distraction and flees. Druli is enraged and frightened by the spell she sees in Rincewind's mind and orders him to be taken away from the tree and killed, but he escapes. Hrun had chased the luggage into the temple and lost it. He stalked through the temple with his magical black talking sword, Kring, in pursuit of the luggage's treasure, aka the gold he saw inside. Two-Flower creeps through the temple with his camera and the tiny imp it contains. He senses that someone else is there and wishes Rincewind was there. Rincewind appears before him. He warns Two-Flower not to think about the number 8, as he tries to lead him to safety. Spellbooks leak magic. That was why the second Rincewind had to look at the Octavo was enough for the spell to slip inside his mind. Rincewind explains to Two-Flower that no one knows what the spell does, and no one will until he speaks it or he dies, and it says itself because it vanished from the Octavo's page once he had learned it. Two-Flower finds an altar room. The luggage and Hrun catch up with them. Rincewind wants to leave, but Two-Flower wants pictures. He begins to set up his camera as Rincewind warns Hrun not to say the number. The sword speaks it, followed by Rincewind summoning the Soul Eater. The group is attacked by black tentacles. Hrun fights back. Rincewind urges Two-Flower to escape, but the Taurus really wants his darn pictures and not to abandon Hrun. When the flash goes off, the Soul Eater is blinded and returns from whence it came. Hrun begins looting the temple, begins collapsing. Hrun calls his horse and uses it to rescue them. The group escapes just as the temple collapses completely. Two-Flower and Rincewind decide to have Hrun accompany them to Quorum for safety. They pay him in pictures, which he loves since heroes love themselves. Fate announces that the lady has won the game. Death vows to get Rincewind eventually. Chapter 3. The Lure of the Worm. The Wormburg rises before the travelers. Rincewind realizes that they are in a strong magical field. Rincewind and Hrun decide to leave. Liessa Wormbitter and her father watch the travelers flee through a scrying glass. Liessa leaves her father to go after them. They want the luggage. Liessa decides to take some riders with her. She longs to rule the Wormburg but can't as a woman. She wonders if this is her chance. If she marries a man, she can rule. She just has to find someone strong but stupid she can control. Hrun looks like an option. Liessa mounts her dragon, Leolith, and goes after the adventurers. The adventurers ride away from their pursuers. Rincewind guides his horse into a forest and is knocked off his mount by a stout branch. He slips into unconsciousness. Rincewind awakens in pain and runs away from the dragon and its rider he sees through the trees. When he stops running, he finds Kring stuck in a tree branch. Hrun had dropped him. The sword explains that the dragons got Rincewind's friends, the horses, and the luggage. After Rincewind retrieves Kring, they argue about whether or not to try and save everyone. Rincewind wants to get help, but Kring takes control of his arm and threatens his life. Kring says he'll teach Rincewind, who doesn't know how to be a hero. Rincewind bests Cassidra, a dragon rider. Rincewind forces the dragon rider to take him back to the Wormburg. Upon arrival, Rincewind realizes that the tables have turned and is asked if he wants to die or surrender. Unable to surrender, courtesy of Kring, Rincewind is forced into combat against Liart, a dragon lord. They are to fight to the death and both bear magic swords. Rincewind fights on the cavernous ceiling and loses his footing when a ring snaps. The riders fight using hooked boots, which attach to rings set in the ceiling. Rincewind clings to his opponent for a few moments before letting go as several crossbows are leveled at him. Twoflower and Hrun are in the Wormburg's dungeon. After Hrun passes Liessa's first test, Twoflower is taken away and Hrun is asked to kill Liessa's brothers as his second test. If he passes both this and her third test, they will be wed and Hrun will become lord of the Wormburg. Twoflower summons a dragon named Ninereeds with his thoughts and escapes his prison cell with him. Twoflower begins to make his way through the Wormburg with his dragon and meets Grisha, Liessa's dead father. Grisha explains the nature of the power, which allowed Twoflower to summon his dragon and its limitations, that his 3 children are fighting over the kingdom and the winner will rule, and that Twoflower will save his friend. Essentially, Grisha is dead, but not dead as we understand the dead. He's basically kind of hanging on by a thread so that he can see out his succession, and once one of his children takes over the Wormburg, he'll die for real, the way that we understand people to be dead. Twoflower flies into the roosting hall where Rincewind is fighting on Ninereed's back and notices a figure falling toward him. Rincewind begins to say the spell. He gets to the final word when Twoflower catches him. Hrun gets to serve as proxy for Liessa in a contest against both of her brothers, Liart and Liartes. They fight with dragons, but Hrun refuses to use one to his advantage. After rendering them both unconscious, Hrun is declared the winner and the brothers are banished from the Wormburg. Hrun prepares to face Liessa's third and final test. Twoflower and Rincewind search for Hrun from atop Ninereeds. Ninereeds plucks Hrun from the killing field where he fought. Liessa is enraged. Liessa and some of her riders pursue the adventurers. Death comes for the dead wizard, Grisha, and kills him fully. Hrun is not pleased by his rescue. Ninereeds vanishes when Twoflower passes out from the thin air. The travelers begin to fall. Liessa catches Hrun on her dragon's neck. Twoflower and Rincewind continue to fall. Death appears. There's a flash followed by darkness, and Rincewind feels solid ground beneath him as ripples of paradox spread. This was the most confusing part of the book for me, but from what I gather, Twoflower and Rincewind are drawn into another universe, and eventually land in an airplane. After wishing he was elsewhere, Rincewind's thoughts draw him back into their own universe. This includes Twoflower, so him and Twoflower, actually them. Anyway, they plummet into the Circle Sea. The luggage follows them a moment later. The humans later employ it as a raft. Chapter 4, Close to the Edge. Golden Eyes makes a fish that would swim through the seas of space that lie between the worlds for the arch-astronomer of Kroll. That's on page 205. Golden Eyes is killed upon its completion. The arch-astronomer notes that all that remains is to find the appropriate sacrifices. That's on 206. Rincewind and Twoflower are being carried toward the Rimfall, the edge of the world. Rincewind saves a struggling frog. After coming close to drowning, Rincewind awakens in the boat he and Twoflower acquired in their 6 months of travel since escaping Ankh-Morpork draws even closer to the edge. Rincewind and Twoflower are saved by a sea troll named Tethys. Tethys takes them to his home and explains the nature of their circumference, that it's a giant net on the edge of the sea, how it was built by the people of Kroll, how he is a slave and they are bound to be enslaved too. Rincewind doesn't want to be a slave and threatens to jump over the edge, but he can't do it. Neither can Tethys. Tethys tells them that they're going to be picked up by a flyer and not a salvage crew because they're important and brought to Kroll. Twoflower and Rincewind are picked up by a flyer from Tethys' abode. Rincewind and Twoflower are brought to Kroll and coerced into a room filled with food. The guest master, Garhartra, informs them that it's his job to make them comfortable, and that they are to be sacrificed on the morrow. He leaves and magically seals a door behind him. Rincewind begins to hear a voice in his head. It's the frog he rescued. The lady had ridden in the frog's mind for a time. She appears before them. She informs them that the Krullians intend to launch a bronze vessel over the edge of the disc. Their prime purpose is to learn the sex of Atueen the world turtle. That's on 250. And that in exchange for their sacrifice, the two of them specifically, fate has agreed to smile on the ship. The lady says she can give them a single chance. They use it to escape the room when Garhartra enters. They run through the palace and into another room which contains the universe. The Cellonauts, destined for the journey over the rim, come into the room. Twoflower and Rincewind knock them out and put on their spacesuits so they can take their places and try to escape. The arch-astronomer senses that something is wrong when the Cellonauts appear in his arena. They are soon followed by the luggage, which survives a multitude of spells before going after the arch-astronomer. The luggage delivers Tethys to the travelers. They come under attack and flee to the ship. They go over the edge. Rincewind sees the ship, the potent Voyager, in the distance from his perch within a tree. He drops from it into the whole of creation, and that's the end of the first novel. Now I want to take some time to tell you guys what I thought about it, basically just review the book. So first of all, the novel jumps right into things and then backtracks a bit as Rincewind tells the story of how the Ankh-Morpork fire starts to Weasel and Bravd. This could be disorienting for first-time readers and those with little or no knowledge of the Discworld, but as someone who has read this book before, it wasn't so bad for me, but I could see where this could be a problem, like I said, for newer readers. I felt like there was a lot going going on with this novel. We get a lot of introductions to major characters and places like Ankh-Morpork, Rincewind, the Unseen University, things like that. And sometimes it made it harder to enjoy the book since things had to be explained. Basically, the explanations disrupted the flow of the novel's plot. There were several minor continuity errors. I'll give a few examples. First, Blind Io, Offler, the Crocodile God, Zephyrus, Fate, and the Lady are described as playing a game over a Discworld board. By the time we next see them, Offler and Io are described as having lost, but only Fate and the Lady remain. What happened to the other gods? Also, when did Rincewind get another horse? I'm pretty sure his got murdered by a bear. An enraged she-bear had barged through the undergrowth and taken the throat out of his horse with one swipe of her paw. That's on page 94. Somehow, I don't think the horse could have survived that. It would have been nice to see a line in passing to explain these minor details, like how he got another horse, where he got another horse. Maybe they stopped in a town for a day and bought some more horses with all of Two Flowers Gold. I don't know, something. That would have been great. I appreciated the page breaks and pauses in each chapter since they were rather long, with the exception of the prologues. It made it easier to find places to pause in long chapters when I needed a break, because I really hate pausing in the middle of a chapter. I don't know if you guys are bothered by that, but when I have to just put a book down because I am too tired to go on, or it's late and it's, a third of the way through, it just bugs me. I'm like, wait, what was I reading? What was happening? What was I doing? Like, I like those natural pauses. I really, really appreciated that in a book with this kind of structure. I found the novel funny. It cracked a lot of jokes with things like characters' names, like Drooly, the Dryad. I really appreciated how by the time I was done reading, I was in a better mood than when I started reading the book. I always really, really appreciated that about Discworld novels and Terry Pratchett's novels, pretty much as a whole. I also really liked the luggage. I appreciated its devotion to Two Flower and its berserker-esque homicidal rages, which maybe shouldn't be something that I appreciate, but I do. It's amusing for me. I like it. I also like how realistic Two Flower and Rincewind are. Two Flower because he's the most stereotypical and lovable tourist ever. He's always snapping photos and excited to see new things, and that's like a really pleasant kind of character to have, someone who's always happy and seeing like the silver lining and seeing everything through a rose-tinted glasses. I mean, yes, it can be a bit much sometimes, but having someone with that positivity is really nice and refreshing to see in a book, because you don't see that a lot. I think Rincewind's realistic because he's terrified of scary things. Not every hero, quote unquote, if you will, is going to go charging into battle. I feel like we see that a lot in books, and when you really think about it, most people probably aren't going to act like that. With that being said, this was Pratchett's first Discworld novel, and I felt as though it was a bit jumpy and the prose was weaker than some of his others, which came later. I really think he was finding his voice in this one, and the series will get stronger as it progresses. Ultimately, I gave this book a 3.1 out of 5-star rating. I really did enjoy it, but I think that there are definitely going to be better novels, and this isn't his strongest work because it was written so long ago in the 80s, I think mid to late 80s if I'm not mistaken, and I know there's better things to come. So there you have it. There is my summary of The Colour of Magic and my review. What did you guys think? Did you like my summary? Did you like my review? Did I leave anything out? Did you read this novel and not enjoy it as much as I did, or did you basically agree with what I had to say? Let me down below in the comments. I always want to know what you guys think. Give me those thumbs up. I love those. Hit that like button and all that jazz. Subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you know what's up. And I will catch you all in the next one. Bye, guys.